My name is Catherine McPhee. I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who had to beg her child to come out of the bathroom. But there I was, on a Tuesday morning in my worn-out robe, hair in a messy bun, my hand on the doorknob, whispering through the crack like my voice might unlock what fear had shut tight. "Carter, honey, please say something." Silence. Not the kind of silence that gives you peace. The kind that fills the hallway like fog, heavy and unnatural. The kind that makes your chest feel too small for your lungs. He'd been in there for 3 days, not just using the bathroom kind of in there, but full-on barricaded. I'd hear the toilet flush, maybe a faucet turn on, but that was it. No other sounds, no music, no movement, no laughter. And Carter, my boy, he used to laugh all the time. He was 14, just started high school. Tall like his dad, Jay, but with my eyes. Soft brown, full of questions. He loved skateboarding, watching old martial arts movies, and baking lemon squares on weekends. He wasn't loud or rebellious. He was gentle, quiet, observant. But something had shifted, and I missed it. It started subtly. A late-night shower here, a door closed a little too long there. His usual hoodie pulled tighter, his voice lower. He stopped texting back quickly, stopped smiling in the mornings. Jay said it was just teenage stuff. "Hormones," he'd wave off. "He's finding himself. You're overthinking." Maybe I was. I always had a tendency to go worst-case scenario. But this wasn't just hormones. This was withdrawal. Something had curled up inside my son and closed the blinds. By day 2, I had tried everything. Bribery. "I'll make pancakes." Logic. "You're scaring me, sweetheart." Anger. "This isn't funny, Carter. Open the door." Nothing worked. I even brought Jay to try. He knocked once, just once, and then said, "It's fine, Catherine. He's probably embarrassed. Let him come out when he's ready." When he's ready? How long is ready when your kid's barely eating? When he hasn't made eye contact in days? When he's locked himself away from the world? I stared at Jay, stunned. This isn't normal. He shrugged. "It's a phase. He'll get over it." I wanted to scream. Instead, I sat outside that bathroom door with my back to the wall and whispered stories from when Carter was little. How he once brought me a worm in a teacup because he thought it looked lonely. How he asked if clouds were soft enough to lie on. How he used to call me Mama Bear even after he grew out of stuffed animals. Tears streamed down my face because I didn't know where that little boy went, and I didn't know how to get him back. On the morning of the 4th day, I cracked. I called the pediatrician and begged for an emergency appointment. I didn't even know what kind of appointment I needed. Therapist, nutritionist, priest. I just knew I couldn't keep doing this. They gave me a same-day slot. "We'll be there at 3, I told Jay. He didn't argue. That should have been my first clue. Something was off. Jay wasn't the arguing type, but he was proud. He didn't believe in outside help. He was a fix-it-yourself man, duct tape and denial. But that day he nodded. "Okay?" Something in his eyes looked off, like he was staring through me. I shook it off. At 2:45, I called for Carter. No answer. Jay knocked lightly on the bathroom door. "Hey, bud, come on, let's go." And just like that, the door opened. Carter stepped out. His face was pale, cheeks hollowed out, eyes red. But he looked calm. Too calm. He didn't speak, just stood there as if waiting. Jay placed a hand on his shoulder. "You okay?" Carter nodded. I rushed forward. "Baby, are you—" He pulled away from me, walked straight out the door with Jay. I grabbed my purse and followed. But when I got to the driveway, they were gone. Jay's car was gone. No note, no explanation, no phone call. Just the taillights, fading around the corner. I called his phone. Straight to voicemail. Called again. And again. I texted. Nothing. I called the clinic and canceled the appointment. I didn't know what else to do. Maybe they needed space. Maybe Carter didn't want to talk in front of me. Maybe Jay was taking him for a milkshake, or to that bookstore he used to love. Maybe I was overreacting. But that night, when neither of them came home, I stopped maybeing. I started panicking. By the next morning, I'd filed a missing persons report. The officer who took the details was kind but skeptical. "Teenage boys run off sometimes," he said. "And your husband went with him, so technically he's not missing." "But they didn't tell me where they were going," I said. "They didn't take clothes, or supplies, or Carter's meds." That got his attention. "He's on medication?" "For anxiety," I said. He scribbled something. "We'll open a case. Do you have any reason to believe they're in danger?" That was the question that stuck with me. Do I? Because in that moment, I didn't know anymore. Jay wasn't a bad man. He was charming, reliable, the kind of guy who fixed the neighbor's fence without being asked. He'd never been violent, never raised his voice, but he had secrets. He never talked about his past. I knew bits and pieces. He'd worked construction before we met, had moved around a lot, lost both his parents young. But there were gaps, long, uncomfortable gaps. Once I found an old envelope in the back of our filing cabinet. It had a different name on it, Jason P. Monroe. Jay's full name was James Robert Reynolds. When I asked him about it, he said it was a legal name mix-up, something from years ago. I wanted to believe him, so I did, until now. 2 days passed, then 3. I barely ate, barely slept. Every time I heard tires on the driveway, my heart would leap, only to crash again. Friends texted, my sister called, everyone offered theories. Maybe they're on a trip. Maybe Carter needed a break. But none of them made sense. Not without a goodbye. Not without even a note. And then, on day 4, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. No stamp. Just slipped into my mailbox, like a ghost had left it. My hands trembled as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Typed. I'm sorry, I tried to keep him safe. I'll fix it, I swear. Don't call the cops. No signature. But I knew the voice. Jay. I collapsed into the kitchen chair. Safe from what? What had he done? What had he dragged my son into? All I could do was cry and wait. After reading the letter, I sat in silence for what felt like hours. I tried to keep him safe. I'll fix it. Don't call the cops. That's what Jay wrote. Except I had already called them. Twice. The file was open. A detective named Morales had even stopped by that morning, asking more questions, taking down details. If Jay had something to fix, it was too late to do it in the dark. But the questions still clawed at me. Fix what? I stared at the letter again, wishing ink could speak. The fact that he didn't sign it didn't matter. I recognized Jay's voice in those short, desperate lines. The tone, the rhythm, like a man trying to duct tape a house during a hurricane. He didn't sound like a man with a plan. He sounded like a man running out of time. I walked through the house like it might answer me. Jay's shoes were still by the front door, his coat still hanging on the hook. But his wallet? Gone. So was the duffel bag I always joked was his end-of-the-world kit, just big enough to disappear. I opened his closet. It looked untouched. Except the floorboard beneath his boots creaked. We'd lived in this house for 12 years, and I'd never noticed it before. Curious, I bent down and pressed it gently. It popped up. Underneath was a small metal box, one of those old fireproof lock boxes that people used before cloud storage and online banking. My stomach dropped. I carried it to the kitchen, heart pounding. It wasn't locked. Inside were 3 things: a driver's license with Jay's face, but a different name, a thick envelope of cash, a photo of Jay and a man I didn't recognize, shaking hands in front of a tattoo parlor. I stared at the license. Jason Monroe. That name again. So it hadn't been a paperwork mix-up. It was real. And Jay, or Jason, had been lying to me for years. I felt cold. Not betrayed. Not yet. Just lost. Like the man I loved had slipped out the back door while a stranger stood in his place. The photo was old. Jay looked younger, cleaner shaven, but his eyes, those hadn't changed. The man next to him was stocky, with a beard and a tattoo crawling up his neck. There was something off about the handshake. Staged. Like they wanted to look friendly for the camera but were watching each other too closely. I flipped the photo over. One word. Eli. The name haunted me all night. Eli. Who was he? Why did Jay keep this? Why now? I barely slept. And when morning came, I called the only person who might know something. David, Jay's former co-worker from a construction job years ago. We hadn't spoken in ages, but I still had his number tucked inside an old Christmas card list. He answered groggily. Hello? David, it's Catherine, Jay's wife. A pause. Oh, hey. I need to ask you something. It's about Jay or Jason. I'm not even sure anymore. The silence on the line told me everything. You knew, I said softly. I wasn't supposed to, he muttered. He told me once after a few drinks. Said he used to run with a rough crowd. Changed his name. Clean slate. That's all I know, I swear. Do you know an Eli? Silence. Then, you should stay far away from that name. My blood ran cold. That day I called Detective Morales again. I told her about the box. The license. The photo. She came over within an hour. This changes things, she said after examining the contents. If your husband has an alias and a history with someone known as Eli, we may be dealing with more than a missing persons case. I stared at her. What are you saying? I'm saying we're going to escalate this. If this Eli is involved, your husband may not have taken your son. He may have been running from something with him. Running or hiding? Maybe both. The next few days blurred. The police tried to track Jay's credit cards. Nothing. Phones turned off. The cash in the box made sense now. He knew to leave no digital trail. Then came the call. Blocked number. I almost didn't answer. Hello? A raspy voice. Mrs. McPhee? I froze. Yes. Your husband owes me, and now the debt's yours." My heart stopped. "Who is this?" "Tell your pretty boy to stop running, or next time we'll mail a piece." Click. I dropped the phone. I called Detective Morales immediately. They traced the call. Untraceable. But they believed me now. This wasn't a family spat or a runaway situation. This was a kidnapping. A debt. A past that had finally caught up. And Carter, my sweet, quiet boy, was caught in the middle of it. I blamed myself for not asking more questions, for believing Jay when he waved away the inconsistencies, for not pushing harder when Carter started changing. Because this wasn't just about Jay. Something had happened to Carter. And now I feared it wasn't just emotional. It was personal. 2 days later, a package arrived. No return address. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a flash drive. I plugged it into my laptop, half expecting a virus. Instead, a video. Grainy footage of a dimly lit room. And Carter, my baby, sitting on the floor, arms wrapped around his knees. He looked exhausted, pale, afraid. A man walked into frame. His face wasn't visible, just his voice. "You tell Mommy we're being nice, for now." He held up a newspaper, yesterday's date. Carter looked at the camera and whispered, "Mom, please don't make them mad." I screamed. I must have watched that video 50 times. Each time I paused on Carter's face, his trembling lip, the way his arms wrapped around his knees like a shield. My son wasn't just scared. He was breaking, and I was running out of time. Detective Morales returned to our house that night with a team. They collected the flash drive, dusted the envelope for prints, asked me to recount every interaction I'd had with Jay or Carter over the past month. I told them everything, even the things I wasn't sure mattered, like how Carter flinched when the doorbell rang, or how Jay started checking the locks twice at night, or the strange call Jay got 2 weeks ago, one that ended with him pale and silent for hours. Morales took it all in. "Do you think Jay is part of this?" I asked. She hesitated. "I think your husband is in trouble, but I also think he's trying to keep your son alive. Whether that makes him an accomplice or a hostage, that's what we're trying to figure out." I nodded, though nothing felt clear. The man I married, was he still in there? Or had he been a stranger all along? The next day, the FBI got involved. They brought in specialists, voice analysts, behavioral profilers, cyber experts. I watched them comb through every digital breadcrumb we had, hoping for something. Anything. At the same time, I turned to something else. Jay's past. I dug through our old tax files, business paperwork, even his high school yearbooks. I called an old girlfriend he'd mentioned once, pretending I was writing a memory piece for a reunion. It didn't take long to find out what Jay never wanted me to know. Jason Monroe had a record. He was arrested at 19 for aggravated assault, charges dropped. Again at 22 for illegal gambling. And again at 24 for suspected involvement in an underground poker ring that had ties to organized crime. It was that last one that made me sit down. Because the name attached to the investigation? Elijah Eli Marchand. That was it. That was the man in the photo. I brought everything to Morales. She looked over the reports with a grim face. "Elijah Marchand's been under the radar for years," she said. "We've suspected him of running illegal gambling circuits, trafficking, even blackmail, but we never had enough to pin him." "And Jay?" I asked. "Was he part of it?" She looked me in the eye. "We think he got out. But you know how these men work. No one gets out clean." 3 days passed. No new messages. No new videos. Just silence. I couldn't sleep. Couldn't eat. I walked through the house like a ghost. The guilt gnawed at me. Why didn't I see it? Why didn't I stop it? Then, late one night, I found another letter in the mailbox. Same style, no return address. Inside, a note. "You want him back? Bring the package to the pier. Dock 7, tomorrow night. Come alone. No cops, or he bleeds." Taped to the note was a photo. Carter. Eyes swollen, lips split. My breath caught in my throat. I showed Morales the letter. She didn't flinch. "We'll set up a sting." I shook my head. "They said no cops." "They always say that. But we'll keep a distance. You'll wear a wire. If there's a chance to grab them safely, we'll take it." "And if there's not?" She didn't answer. The next night, I stood at Dock 7. Package in hand. It was a decoy, filled with bundled paper, made to look like cash. But it felt real, heavy. I wore the wire. My heart pounded with every step. The pier was dark, fog curling around my feet like warning fingers. Boats rocked gently in the distance. I stood still, waiting. Then a figure emerged from the shadows. He wore a black hoodie, gloves, and a baseball cap low over his eyes. "Package," he said. "Where's my son?" "Package first." I hesitated, then handed it over. He snatched it, opened it slightly, and cursed. "Fake." Suddenly, a flash of movement. He lunged at me. Before I could scream, lights flooded the dock. FBI agents swarmed in from every angle. "Drop it! Hands in the air!" The man tried to run. He didn't get far. They tackled him, pinned him. I collapsed to my knees. "Where's Carter?" I screamed. The man looked at me, smiling through bloodied teeth. "You're already too late." The words cut deeper than any knife. Too late? I couldn't believe that. Wouldn't believe it. They dragged the man into custody, and Morales promised they'd get answers. But as the night faded and the sky turned gray, I sat in my car in the parking lot, praying, bargaining, replaying every second in my head. Because there was one thing I knew without a doubt. My son was still out there, and I would burn the world down to bring him home. The man from the pier refused to speak for the first 12 hours. They called him Rico, one of Eli Marchand's known enforcers. He had a rap sheet longer than some novels and a reputation for being loyal to Eli to the death. But by the next morning, after hours in an interrogation room and a phone call from someone on the inside, Rico broke. "I don't know where the kid is," he said, voice hoarse, "but Jay might still be alive, and he made a deal." That was the turning point. Through surveillance, wiretaps, and testimony, the FBI began piecing together Eli's operation. Jay, Jason, had resurfaced because Eli demanded payment. Years ago, Jay had stolen a large sum of money during a botched poker bust, and even though the authorities had let him walk, Eli hadn't. He'd been watching, waiting, and when Carter started showing signs of anxiety, paranoia, and fear, it wasn't just teen hormones. It was a scared boy trying to protect his dad. Jay had tried to keep it from both of us. He thought if he ran, if he surrendered quietly, it would protect us. But it only made things worse. 2 more days passed. Then we got the call. A warehouse, outside city limits, abandoned. Carter had been spotted. Morales brought me into HQ. "You need to stay here," she said. "No," I whispered. "Please. You've done enough, Catherine. Let us bring him back." I sat in the conference room, staring at the wall while time passed like molasses. Then I heard the door swing open, and there he was, Carter, wrapped in a blanket, dirt smudged on his cheeks, limping slightly but upright. Alive. I rushed to him, arms open, and he fell into me like he had as a toddler, sobbing against my shoulder. "I thought you were gone," I whispered, clutching him. He didn't answer, just held me tighter. The next few hours were a blur of doctors, questioning, and tears. Carter had been held in the warehouse for 6 days. Jay had kept him alive, smuggling in food, covering for him, even taking a beating when Carter mouthed off to one of the guards. But 2 nights ago, Jay made his final move. He distracted Eli's men long enough to get Carter out through a loose panel behind the storage crates. But Jay hadn't followed, because Eli caught him. And Carter ran until he found an open road. That's where he was found. Exhausted, bloodied, but free. Eli was arrested the next day. Jay's body was recovered a week later. He had died protecting Carter. His final act, not as a criminal, but as a father. He left behind a final letter, found tucked in Carter's pocket. It was addressed to me. "Catherine, I'm sorry I lied, sorry I disappeared, sorry I brought this to your door. I wanted a clean life. I thought I could outrun what I was. I couldn't. But Carter, he's everything I wish I'd been. He's good, honest, brave, protect him. Remind him every day that he is not me, that he can be better. Tell him I love him. Tell him I was proud, always. And you, God, you were my light. I failed you, but I loved you. I hope one day you believe that. Jay." I cried for hours, not just for the man I lost, but for the pain we'd all carried, the fear, the lies, the love beneath it all. Because despite everything, Jay had died trying to be the man he never thought he could be. It's been a year now. Carter's still healing. Therapy has helped. So have the long walks we take together, the new family dinners we make, simple meals with no tension at the table, just laughter returning in small doses. He still flinches when he hears raised voices, still has nightmares sometimes, but he's getting stronger, day by day. As for me, I'm rebuilding. I've gone back to work part-time, started gardening again. I've even begun writing, a memoir maybe, or just a diary for now. Something about getting it all out helps, because telling the story means taking back control. Owning the narrative, not letting the fear win. Sometimes people ask me how I survived it all, and the answer is simple. You survive because you have to. When you're a mother and your child is out there, hurting, afraid, you find a strength you didn't know you had. You don't break. You bend. You scream when no one's looking, but you keep going until they come home. I'll never forget what happened. And I won't pretend Jay was a perfect man, but I will remember what he did in the end. And I'll remind Carter that even broken people can choose to be brave. Even if it's in the final hour, because that's what love is. Not always clean, not always safe, but worth everything when it's real. And my love for my son was and always will be unbreakable.